Hello, everybody. Welcome to Building Queries Advanced. Um, I have you all muted right now, so if anybody has a question, just click the raise your hand button and or just unmute yourself and chime in. Because I'm going to go through this pretty quick because there's a lot of stuff to cover. So if you have a question, it's likely that somebody else might have the same question. So I don't want to wait until the end to cover all those. So just anytime you have anything to say, just go ahead and do it. And also, this is going to not focus so much on SQL and SQL techniques as it is familiarization with the GE database and how to pull certain pieces of information out that aren't exactly clear, and also how that will apply to making custom queries in GE. So, hold on. There we go. Okay, here's the scheme that we sent out. Did anybody have any trouble opening it up? I think everybody received the file, but did anybody have any trouble opening it? Oh, yeah. Okay, here's a new development. Since I'm working in full screen here, don't worry about raising your hand. Just unmute and ask a question if you have one, or make a comment. Okay, so if you've opened up this schema file, it starts out at the overview screen, and you'll notice that this is 3800, which we've got everybody on all kinds of different versions, but this is the most recent one, and there's another version for 4.0 that's being worked on now. But it's important to note that the differences between 3.8 and 4.0 are not going to be huge differences, but it's just because we don't make changes to the database too often, so it would just be a handful of fields or views that would make the difference between them. So this is perfectly usable for just about any version of GE that you're on. All right, so let's take a look at the GE database. And we'll be looking at the 4.0 version of the database. And the two parts that we'll be concerned with are tables and views. If I expand this, you can see these are all the tables in SQL. There's a whole lot of them, and they're in alphabetical order, so there's no real, other than that, no organization to them. So that's why what is useful about the schema, and that those tables are all grouped into categories here: grants, proposals, scholarships. And by the way, this scholarship one here is not quick scholarships. This refers to the full scholarship module in GE. I'm having trouble with this mouse. If I expand the grants one, you'll see all these all these tables here are relevant to all the data fields that you can find on all the tabs in grants. We're gonna build a couple of custom queries, and I wanted to focus on how to pull specific characteristics and profile fields, and how to pull payments and use filters on them and all that sort of stuff. And if anybody has any specific questions about where to find a specific field or how to pull a specific piece of data, again, just chime in and ask, and we can address that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So the schema here, got some, okay. I'm hearing background noise. All right, so let's start with grants on the schema. The grants table here, GR grants, is the main table for if you're going to build a custom query. You're always going to start here. 99% of the time, this GR grants table is going to be part of your query. So if you click on it, what it shows you are the names of all the fields in the table. It shows you the data type, shows you if it can be null or not, and a short description of what that field is. And on some of the tables, this one included, at the very bottom, scroll down here, and it shows you tables that are also relevant to this grants table. And in most cases, they'll be linked by a common index, and that is almost always going to be grant ID. But so, for instance, if you wanted to know what the report description is for a grant, go here to the grant notes table, and it brings you there. And if you were part of the last query session, you might remember that nature of grant is report designation. And it tells you exactly that over here in the description. So that's what this schema is used for. It's just a kind of a guide to navigating your way around the GE database. It gives you a whole lot more information than just looking at the tables directly in SQL like this. All right. So to start out, just a quick description of what the tables are. The tables are where the data in GE is actually stored. And that information can be used to create views. Now, views are collections of tables that essentially, when you're building a custom query, you're going to be building a view. And then you're going to move that view into GE as a custom query. That's the basic process that we're going to go through. And if you're looking in your database, you should see all of these same tables. Tables should be identical, but you're probably going to see quite a bit of difference in the views because while there are some that are that everybody has across the board, it's very, very common for each client to have their own set of views that are specific to them. So let's go ahead and get started. One other thing. In GE, go to the query section in GE, do a new query. We're going to start with just a basic grants custom query. And if you remember from the last session, this custom checkbox takes away all of your ability to select fields and filters and sort here in the query section of GE. Now, ultimately what we're going to do is build our view over here in SQL, kind of like this one is here on the screen, you can see. And then when we're done with it and we're satisfied that it's giving us the results that we want, we move it over here and just paste it right in there, save it and close it, and then you've got your own custom view. So that's the basic process. Now to start with, open up your grants database, go to Views, right-click on it, and select New View. It brings up this Add a Table. And I'm gonna start with something fairly simple. We're just gonna pull some grant payments and maybe some grant notes. So scroll down through here. And if you recognize this is the same as that list of tables that you could see over here. We'll start with grants. And we'll do some grant notes. I'm sure everybody's aware that grants can have multiple funds. If you're familiar with the grants table, you'll see in here you've got a field that's fund ID. And that field right there and this target fund ID below it are only used for interfund transfers. So in every other case, especially in the case of grants that have multiple funds, you're going to want a table called GR Grant Funds. And here it is. Right. You notice how it automatically tries to join these tables when you add them to the view. It doesn't always do that right. It's a computer, and sometimes it just does what it wants. But generally, if it recognizes the same column name between two tables, it'll try and link them up automatically like that. But you should always check and make sure that these auxiliary or these satellite tables are hooked up to the main grants table, and not to, for instance, it could have done it like this. I've hooked it up from here to here. And in a lot of cases, that doesn't matter, but the more complex the query gets, the more it does start to matter. So you kind of want to keep your eye on that. All right. And one other thing about these joins is right now, if you right-click on these little nodes here, it'll give you the option to remove the node, which we don't want to do, or to select all from either one or both of the tables that are joined together. And as a general rule, you always want to join tables in the direction of, if that makes sense,
Hi.
main table, right? Otherwise, there's a chance. The more complex it gets,
Okay, thank you.
increases the chance of missing records from the grant table. So basically, what it does, the way it's joined right now, is if question. No? Okay. So the way it's joined right now is that if, for instance, a particular grant doesn't have grant fund, which can happen, that it still won't miss the other grant data that you select in here. It won't come up blank. And so, start with grant ID, grant number, grant type, number of payments, right? So, going back to what I was saying about multiple funds, this grant funds table is responsible for associating multiple funds or just a single fund other than transfers with a grant. So if I select fund ID, execute this, and put a sort on it. You can see most of these are just single fund grants. Right? Now we want to add payment information to it. A lot of this stuff, as far as we've come so far right now, a lot of this can just be done without a custom query, but I'm just building it up to the point where we'll get to the point where you can't do it as a standard query. Down here, we got the payment table. All right, and see, like I mentioned before, it does its best to try and connect it, to try and join the tables itself, and that's not the way you want to join it. So we're going to get rid of that and take it over here, select it like that. And again, we want to select all records in the direction of the grants table. So that in this case, it would be everything from grant funds. So let's get the payment number, amount, pay date, payment status, date paid, check number, and adjusted amount. Now just so everybody knows that you have, well, I hope you all have, your own specific characteristics. Go back over here into GE, go to config, characteristics. Here's all the list of characteristics that we have on our test system. And we want to add NTE code. Right? I've already got these two examples open up here. This is a view called VGRQRY grant characteristics. You can find that in here under the view list. And this is one of the views that everybody should have. And the reason I'm showing you this one is because this is an excellent place to start if you need to pick a specific characteristic out of your database or a specific profile. So if we go down here and find this, here's the grant characteristics. When you right-click on it and select design, this is what you should see. It might not be in this exact order, but it'll be the same thing. When you run this, down here at the bottom, showing you the grant ID and all of the characteristics associated with a particular grant. So you can see that grant ID 83 has 3 total characteristics. It's got 2 NTE codes, which is probably a problem in real life, but this is a test system. So we said we wanted NTE code. And here we've got name. That refers to this column, which is the actual characteristic name. When you first run this view, like I said, it brings back every characteristic that's in the database and associates it with whatever grant that it's connected to. So we're looking for NTE code. We just ran this. We find what we're looking for, copy it, and paste it in here. Now, when we run it, all we're getting is NTE codes. And again, this is a test system. In your real system, you'll have a whole lot more than this. All right, so I just modified this standard query that comes with the system. We don't want to do that, okay? What you want to do at this point, select it all, copy it, come over here, right-click, select New View, close that, and paste it in there, all right? So now we just created a new view that's specific to a process that we want. And we'll call it underscore GRY. You can name it anything you want, but I've got my own naming standards.
No problem.
Right? I say OK. Now I've got my own view that I just created that's going to pull a specific characteristic that I can also use this view to help build out this custom query that we're working on right now. And one thing, kind of tedious, but when you create a new view like this, you're not going to find it in this list yet. So once we've created it, we can't just go right over here, right-click, say Add Table. On the View tab, it's not going to be in this list at this point until you hit refresh. Bear with me, this is not my mouse. I'm using a very sensitive one. All right, so here it is. Just double click on it and close that down. In this case, it did connect the tables correctly. And again, we want to join it so that we're getting everything from grants. And we want the code value of that characteristic. We run it. And we see there's not a whole lot of them, but here's a couple of them. And 83 with the 2. Okay. So at this point, are there any questions at all? You guys are making this easy. Can't hear me, right? Okay, so just like you can filter on a got characteristics open. Like you can filter on a non-custom query through here, this section, remember from last time? Very similar here. Once you put a filter in this part of it, though, and you save your view like we covered last time, you can change it, but it's pretty much hard-coded in there. So let's say right now we just want paid payments. And let's see if we've got any grants that are paid that have an NTE code. All right. We just built in a filter to it. Sometimes you'll find, depending on the fields that you select up here, sometimes you'll find duplicate entries. And the first thing you want to try, if that's what you see, is just to add the word distinct right here. And if there are duplicates, it'll take care of those, in most cases. If not, then it requires a little bit of detective work to find out what's causing the duplicates. And in every case, it's because one of the fields that you've chosen would be different. Like, say, we've got 2542 and 2542. You go across these rows, and so far it looks like they're all the same, so it should take the distinct out. But eventually you get over here to the adjusted amount, and they're different. So that's why distinct didn't get rid of that. It's not actually a duplicate record. All right, one other thing that you can do here is called grouping. This is something that you can't do with a standard query. You can do filters, you can do sorting, but you can't do grouping. So you have to do it here if you want that. Now grouping has got, here's the little grouping button here. It adds another column, a group by column, and it automatically defaults them all to group by. Each one of these has a drop down, several options in it. Some of them are like these down here. You'll probably never have to use those. The more common ones are up here. Sum, average, min, max, count. You've got count distinct, sum distinct. What that does is, let's say for the case of 2542 here, we're going to group by everything, but we want to total up these two amounts here. So we want to sum those. We run it again. Oh, it didn't take it out. Oh, I suppose we've got that there. Check number. It's 2 payments. I didn't notice that. So because these are two different values, it's still not summing these. If I want to sum those, I'll have to take check number out. And there's still something else. Oh, payment number. I didn't that out. And there's still something else. Pay date. All right. So now it's summed them all up. Now if I take this sum back out, just put it back to group by, you'll notice that they both come back. It split them up. Minimum is what it sounds like. It's only taking the minimum payment. And maximum is the exact opposite, so it would take the higher payment. So you can play around with those. They come in handy sometimes if you're doing special things, especially if you're looking for duplicates. If I take out adjusted amount altogether, we still have 2452 grant IDs here. And I want to, let's take code value out temporarily. Now I want to find out if there are any true duplicates in here. So I want a minimum amount of information I'm working with. But we can keep paid in there. Take amount out, fund ID out. Number of payments is okay, grant type is okay. Up here in the grant ID is going to be a unique field that's assigned by the system. You all know that. And if I select count distinct and run it, notice it changed this. We're not going to see grant ID anymore. It's going to show us the grant number and then the number of records that are in the database. For most of them, it's going to be 1. But if there were true duplicates, then it would show the number of duplicates. If there were 2, it would show 2. If there's 5, it would show 5. That's just some of the stuff that you can do with the grouping column. And remember, it doesn't show up there by default. It's something you have to add it by clicking this button.
Okay.
All right, let's go back to the way it was. Go to the group. Okay, so this is pretty simple. Usually custom queries are gonna be a
Okay,
whole
thank
lot
you.
more complex than this. But right now, we're halfway through with this, and I'd like to just show you the last step in order to get this to actually be a custom query in GE. And I'd like to open it up for questions because, um, like I said, this is a very simple example, and I want you to walk away with this from this with some idea of where to find specific fields that you're interested in having as part of your custom queries. So the last step would be select it all, copy it, back over here to the GE query section. We're going to check the custom box.
Like the instructions how to do it?
And this is focus on grants. So go to the results tab. It always gives that arrow, so don't worry about it. Select all that, paste it in there, run it. Now you've got your own custom query. So there's so many fields in the database. You know, there's dozens and dozens of tables and hundreds of fields. So I'd like if somebody wants to see a real world example, I would welcome anybody's question.
Graham, this is Ann. I'm just wondering if there's any concern about altering tables.
No, not with this technique. I mean, actually modifying the data that's in them or modifying the table itself.
Right. You know, clicking, say you're in the tables on your server and I just, wanted to know if there's any concern on your end. Hey, be careful.
Why don't you just dial into the conference bridge?
Well, we're when we're working in a
use
view like we are here on this screen,
the conference
you
site?
can't modify data in the tables themselves, and you can't modify the tables. Because remember, views are just collections of tables, so you're not actually in the table itself. You know, the tables are just building blocks to create the view. So through a view, you can't change data or table structure. Now,
Nick speaking.
if you're in the table list here and you right-click on it and select all rows. Now in this part, now we're looking at the actual raw data that's in the characteristic codes table. And you certainly can go in here and change any of this. It won't stop you. So you definitely want to avoid that.
I guess that's what I'm saying. Just be careful that you're, when you are doing this, that you're in the right folder, that you're in views and not tables.
Right.
And
yeah. If there will be times when you have to open up a table to look at it like this, to be able to find the piece of information that you're looking for. But that would be the extent of your use of tables. And yeah, you're right. It would be almost impossible to figure out exactly what changed if something was accidentally changed. So yeah, you definitely want to be very careful about that. I'll take that back. There is one case where you can change something from a view. If you have a view, and if I did that too quick, I just created another view here. And you add a table to it. Grants again. So now what I've got here is a view that, unlike most views that contain multiple tables, this view only contains a single table. So if I execute it, oh, I didn't select anything. Here. So if I execute it, you see all these results. At this point, since there's only a single table in this view, you can go in here and change the data. Good point. I'm glad I didn't forget to tell you that. If something changes and you can't quite figure out what it was, the recourse for that would be to pull the most recent backup that you've got and do a comparison of the fields that you think have changed. And so for the most part, it would be a recoverable thing, but it's just something you want to avoid if at all possible. go over some of these views that we've got built in here. You'll notice these the nomenclature of the view names. Most of the ones up here at the top that just have V underscore and then something else, those were usually done for during conversion. So there's not a whole lot of them here because this is our test system. Or they were done by someone searching for something that it was a one-time deal. These three GR doc views are the standard views for a query. Let me get this out of here for a second. When you select new query, you go to all these fields that are in here for a grant, in this case, come from this view. You definitely don't want to mess with that one either. And likewise for proposals and scholarship applications. Those are the views that drive these basic focus areas of a of a standard grant. And then the GRQRY ones are ones that are specifically used for custom queries, custom fields. GRRPT ones are used for reports. You might notice in your database that you've got ones that are, like say one that's GRQRY proposal profiles. And there should be an GRRPT version of the same view. Well, not in our test server apparently, but it would be very common for you to see two views that are essentially the same thing, but they only differ in the sense that one of them is a GRQRY type view and one's a GRRPT type view. But other than that, they function identically. And the reason that you'll see that is because sometimes reports require some modification, believe it or not. And that requires going into the views that are created specifically for reports. So you can go in there and modify those report views without having to worry about how it's going to affect any queries that are built on the same type of view.
So any custom reports we have, this is where we will find the queries that back up those reports.
Exactly.
Nice.
And you'll typically when I make them, and there's a couple other people that do the same thing too. Notice the way that, let me go up and refresh this real quick. Oh, come on. Just need to be able to see the view that we just created in this list. There it is right here. When I create views for any of the client sites, I use the GRQRY and the GRRPT naming standard, but in place of demo, a lot of times you'll see an acronym for your foundation. The reason I do that is because it helps you when you get to the point where you're creating a whole bunch of views for special queries or that are report oriented. If you put something in there like I did, the word demo there, it keeps them all grouped together, so you don't have to go hunting around all over the place looking for them, because this is, it's a pretty extensive list. And if you don't have some kind of a naming standard, you could lose views that you made pretty easily.
Do you have your naming convention documented that you could share with us?
Sorry, say that again?
So we know what the naming conventions mean. Do you have a document that outlines like GRRPT, GRQRY?
No, not really. you can have any kind of naming convention you want. If you say, for instance, if you open up a report, let's get away from queries for a second. But if you go into Report Designer and open up a report, and you look at the query that drives the report, it'll show all the views and all the tables that are used to pull the data. So even though they might be kind of wonky names, they don't necessarily follow any kind of naming standard, you'll be able to see what's involved in pulling that data. So you can still find it in the list of views, but I just think it makes it cleaner and easier to use if you have some kind of naming convention.
No, and that is a best practice. I was just wondering if Fusion Labs had some kind of standards that you all follow as a team.
Pretty much that.
I won't put you on the spot, Graham.
If it makes you feel better, Leslie and I do most of the custom queries and custom fields and reports and all the views that go along with all of that stuff, and we follow that same naming convention. So the vast majority of the views that are used for your reports and your queries and all that stuff will also follow that. Kind of an unwritten rule that Leslie and I came up with that we use. So I was hoping somebody would have some specific questions about how to get information out of their system. Because volumes of books have been written on SQL. I was hoping that we could get a real life example out here. Does anybody have any questions? Does this all make sense to you though so far?
I hope I'm not the only one with questions. I don't
Well,
want to hoard the time here.
You've got questions. Shoot.
Graham, this is Kiko from Silicon Valley.
Hi, Kiko.
Hi. Is it possible to combine like the different views from a web application to a scholarship to a grant?
You mean like as it progresses from the web and to, or like say it's a proposal web application and then to a proposal and then to a grant?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. There are tables that we use. Let me just clear this out and we'll start with this. Let's start with something simple like we'll back our way into it a little bit. We'll go from a proposal to a grant first, and then we'll go back into the proposal web application. So first thing we ultimately want to get to the grant, we'll say, for this example. So we want the grants table. And there's this table here called grant parents. And what that holds is the ID of the record that any particular grant came from, right? So in this case, we want to go backwards because we're pulling information that comes from the web. We want everything to come out of the grant parents table. Let's get a grant ID and a grant number. Parent type here can be a whole lot of different ones. And in your system, it may be different from this one. You may have more or less, but you'll see that the parent type can be any kind of record that can ultimately become a grant. So we got grant request, scholarship application, proposal, designated grants, who knows what else, scholarship applications. So that's what parent type is. And in this case, we're wanting to come from proposals, so we're only interested in the ones that have parent type of proposal. Notice we have 370 records down here right now. Execute it again. So now we've only got ones from proposals. Now, from here, the parent ID is going to be the ID of the proposal record. I'm going to add the proposal table here. Right. Notice it didn't automatically link it up because none of these fields here in the grant parents table and none of these fields here in the grants table matches up with anything here in the proposal table. So it didn't know what to do with it. So now it expects you to know that proposal ID is the parent ID, right? Get everything from proposal. Go ahead and get that from there. Now, okay, so now we've got the proposal and the grant. Next thing we want, guess what the next table we want is? Guess what it's called? It's called proposal parents. Right here. And notice it did automatically link it there because they share the same proposal ID field. Let's get everything from proposal parents. And again, these are all web applications. We don't have anything else besides that. It would still be good practice to make sure that you're filtering the right type of record here. Let's go ahead and put web application in there, even though it's not going to make a difference in this particular example, just good practice. All right, and then the next table is did I miss it? There we go. Web applications. And again, notice that it didn't automatically connect them because they don't share any common fields. It expects you to know that the application ID is the parent ID of this proposal. Let's get status from there. ID and status. Now, this being our test system, I don't know if we've actually got any web applications that have been made into proposals that have been made into grants, but we'll see. Yep, sure do. So these 5 tables together, going from left to right, takes you from an online web application to the middle table, which is the proposal, to the table on the far right, which is the grant. Now, the way that I selected the fields, the results on the bottom down here are opposite the way they run up here. So you've got the grant on the left, proposal in the middle, web application on the right. So you can do that with like from here at the proposal stage. You take proposal and the proposal parent and the web application out, and remember when we just ran it with grants and grant parents, that it came up with several different types of parent type. So there's a whole lot of different kinds of records, that ultimately end up becoming grants. They just take a different path to get there. So if you wanted to look for something other than a proposal web application, these 2 tables here would still be the same. But depending on the parent type of record that you're coming from, these 3 tables here would change. That all make sense? And again,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and again, if if just the results here satisfy what you need, and you can just save this and leave it in the database, or again, you can copy and paste it and bring it over here into a custom query, which it's not set to do yet, but just click the button, results, then paste it in here, and that's not what I wanted. And then you would have this query that you just built available to anybody who wanted to use it anytime, without having to go back in and do all this mess at the top again. And it would be accessible in GE, so you wouldn't necessarily have to have access to the server and the database and all that. It'd be a lot easier for just a regular user to access it, make use of it. Any other questions? No, somebody's got to. Selena, do you have a question? I think if there's anything else that I didn't cover. That's pretty much. I know that the name of this webinar is Queries Advanced, but that's kind of the basic advanced version. I think what you're going to find is when you start looking at this schema, the way that these different categories are organized with the relevant tables.
Can you hear me?
Whoa. Oh, that's better. I think once you start looking at this schema file, it's going to be very helpful to help let you figure out how tables are connected to each other. And some of them, like this payee, proposal payee, and proposal recipient, they don't have on the bottom section here same thing as the main proposal table does, where it shows you the tables that it's linked to. And this is an incomplete list, but it gives you an idea of how they're connected, at least. You know that just because that these are all in the same grouping, that they can be connected together somehow or another. It's just it's a matter of taking the time to look at it and figure out what common fields each table has, and it'll all come together and make sense before you know it.
Graham, this is Ann. What would you say is one of the main questions or issues that you and Leslie see coming through with queries when they're not working? And maybe some tips you could give us to, be careful when you do this or this kind of scenario?
Your line is now unmuted.
I would say a pretty common thing would be duplicates, especially in the case of standard queries. Because these, like I said, all these fields here are driven by views in the database over here, right? So, and they're standard for the most part, unless you see ones that are. We don't have one here in our test environment, but you'll see a section that's called foundation fields or custom fields or something like that. And sometimes, if you try and build a query that's too complex, that's just a standard query, non-custom query, then you'll have duplicates in it. And the only way to fix them is to convert the standard query into a custom query. And the first thing that we always do to try and get rid of duplicates, just because it's the most simple, is say this is a query that we just took from as a standard query from GE. First thing you always want to try is just put distinct in there, if you can spell it right. And so you try that first, and if there's still duplicates in there, then a lot of times you have to try and rebuild the query using your own table constructions. You put together your own view without using the standard views that are used for standard queries, because those those views that are used for standard queries are notorious at times for complex queries, especially of producing duplicates.
Which makes me wonder why the standard queries aren't using the term distinct.
I don't know. That would be a design question that I'm not sure. It seems like, it doesn't, the word distinct it's completely harmless if you put it there and it's not needed. So whether it's, it does make sense to just automatically include it,
Right.
I'm not sure why the developers haven't done that. There may be a reason for it. I just don't know it.
Hmm.
But there have been times when getting rid of duplicates was as simple as converting a standard query into a custom query and just adding distinct.
Getting distinct.
It's not
Well,
uncommon at all.
right. It just seems like that would solve issues.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and there's a couple of cases I've identified where I'm not sure exactly why some of the standard query views have been changed, but it seems like they've been changed by, I don't know, some automated process, like an upgrade.
Oh, okay.
And it's not, I mean, it's not huge changes. It's not detrimental. It's just, I'm just curious as to why they were changed the way they were. And I'm not sure if that's what causes duplicates. It may just be the way that the query feature in GE works. I've never heard a real explanation as to why, but I've asked.
So my last question is, we have some custom reports that are not working right. So what we do first is go to the query and look at the source that's
Right,
pulling
yeah.
the information. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you would, in the case of a report, you would start with the report itself. You have to have an understanding of how the query for the report is built. And
Mm-hmm.
generally what I'll do is open up the report, look at the query, copy that query into a new view, copy it into here so that I can look at it graphically just the same way as you would look at it like it was in Report Designer. And sometimes just if it's got multiple tables and multiple views, you usually can leave the tables alone, because if you're having problems with the results that a report is producing, the problem almost always lies with some view that's being used. So what I'll do is one by one take out a view and then rerun the results and see if it gives me what I need. And by doing that, I can identify exactly which view is causing the problem, and then attack it, directly instead of having to wonder why it's doing what it's doing.
Okay.
Kind of like a process of elimination.
And in best practice is to make a copy so you're not messing with the original code. And once you figure it out, then go fix it.
Exactly. That's why I would open it up in the Report Designer first, or Report Builder.
Okay.
Copy the query over here into SQL, so that the report remains the same, and I can play around with the query all I want, and not worry about changing anything, not changing nothing in the database, not changing anything in the report. And then once I get it giving the results that I want, I would just copy it back out of SQL and right back into the query for the report, and that's it.
Okay.
So, any other questions? And I believe the next webinar we're having is going to be a basic reporting thing. So it's going to kind of flow right into it.
Great. Thanks, Graham.
You're welcome. And everybody remember that there's going to be a survey sent out after this webinar is closed. And Lisa would very much like for you to fill it out and send it back so you can read them. Whatever she does with them, I don't know, but we would like to have them. So if there are no other questions, I'd like to wish you all a happy pre-Friday. And if you have any questions that you think of is that a question? No? Anybody who's left, if you have any questions, you can just shoot an email to GE Support and get you some additional information or clarification.
Thank you, Graham.
All right, you're welcome. Have a good evening.